There was a man, not different from you, not more educated, not more privileged, not born into wealth, but he knew something, he remembered something, that all things begin not in the world, but in the mind. And so he wrote. He didn't try to beg, he didn't try to plead with the universe. He wrote as if the thing had already been done. He wrote from the end. He took a piece of paper and with the stillness of conviction he penned, "I am so grateful I won the lottery." The winning numbers were called, and I felt calm. I knew it was mine, and he repeated it, not with effort, but with joy, with stillness, with inner knowing. He wasn't waiting for evidence. He became the evidence. He didn't check the odds, he checked only his inner state. Every day he returned to the page, not because he doubted, but because he delighted in the assumption. He lived inside the feeling of the wish fulfilled. He walked like a wealthy man. He gave thanks like a wealthy man. He wrote as a wealthy man would write, calm, direct, and certain. The world told him he was foolish. But the world only mirrors the voices within. So he ignored the noise and listened to the still voice inside that whispered, "It is done." And then it happened. The numbers were drawn. His hands did not shake. His heart did not race. He had already received it in the unseen. The physical was just a delayed echo of the truth he had accepted long before. This is how it works. You do not write to get, you write because you already have. You do not imagine to attract, you imagine to awaken what is already yours. So I ask you, how would you write if you knew you couldn't fail? How would you speak if the universe had no option but to deliver? How would you live if the money was already on its way? Write like that, think like that, feel like that, and you will see that nothing is withheld from the one who knows who they are. You are not trying to win the lottery. You are awakening to the truth. You are the one who gives the command. Your outer world is not shaped by chance, luck, or circumstance. It is the outpicturing of your inner state, the thoughts you dwell upon, the images you nurture in your imagination, the assumptions you hold as true. These are the architects of your experience. To believe that wealth comes from external causes is to hand your power over to the illusion of the world. But once you grasp that imagination is the true cause of wealth, you begin to live from a different center. You stop trying to manipulate the outer world and instead begin to master the inner. To win the lottery, or to achieve anything that seems unlikely or miraculous, one must not seek to become lucky. Luck implies randomness, but there is nothing random in a universe governed by consciousness. There is only reflection. What you accept and believe within yourself is faithfully mirrored back to you by life. The man who wins is not the man who wishes. He is not the man who writes out his desires while simultaneously doubting them. The man who wins is the one who assumes the state of the winner. This is not about positive thinking or repeating empty affirmations. It is about shifting into a new state of being. To assume the state of already being wealthy means you begin to feel the life you would live if your desire were already fulfilled. You do not wait for the external world to validate your imagination. You move inward to that secret place, and you see yourself already possessing what you desire. You hear congratulations in your imagination. You feel the softness of the sheets in your new home. You smell the leather of your new car. You write not to beg, but to declare. There is a great difference between wishful thinking and inner knowing. Wishful thinking comes from lack. It says, I want this because I don't have it. Inner knowing says, it is already mine. And so when you write, write from the end. Do not write, I hope I win the lottery. Write, I am so grateful I have won. It feels peaceful. Everything is unfolding perfectly. And as you write, do not just scribble words. Feel the truth of what you are declaring. Let it saturate your mind and body. Let the words become real to you. This is not about faking it. This is about awakening to a deeper truth, that you are not separate from your desire. The moment you assume it, the moment you live in it inwardly, it begins to harden into fact. You must become so convinced of your inner reality that the outer world cannot shake you. You may not know how or when it will arrive, but that is not your concern. The bridge of incidents will unfold in perfect time. Your only task is to remain faithful to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You do not need to chase, manipulate, or scheme. You only need to imagine. Imagine vividly, imagine consistently, imagine boldly. Your imagination is not a fantasy. It is the creative power that forms your reality. Use it wisely, for it is always at work. And when you write from that sacred place of inner conviction, you are not merely expressing hope, you are setting creation in motion. When he sat down to write, he was not a beggar hoping the universe might toss him a coin. He was a creator aligning himself with the reality he had already chosen. The words he wrote did not come from doubt or desperation, they came from authority. He didn't ask, will it happen? He stated, it has happened. The subtle difference in tone, in belief, in posture, is what separates those who receive from those who only wish. Words are not mere symbols on a page, they are vehicles of power. When spoken or written with conviction, they move unseen forces into action. He understood something most never do, that words mold reality. Not because they are magic in and of themselves, but because they carry the energy, the assumption, and the inner state of the one who speaks or writes them. When he wrote, I am the winner of the lottery, he was not engaging in fantasy. He wasn't daydreaming or toying with a nice idea. He was stepping into a new version of himself and affirming what that version already knew to be true. The pen became a sacred instrument. It was no longer ink on paper, it was command upon consciousness. People often write from a place of fear. They journal their worries, they write about what they lack, they chronicle what hasn't gone right. All this does is reinforce the current reality they claim to want to escape. But when he wrote, it was different. He didn't record his current situation, he declared his new one. He didn't say, I hope one day I will win. He said, I have won. And then he felt what that meant. He infused the sentence with certainty, calm, and peace. He didn't need to see the numbers yet, because he had already seen them within. Words backed by belief become law, not because the world must obey, but because the world does obey the inner convictions of man. The outer responds to the inner. And so he wrote not to convince the world, but to convince himself. Every sentence was a reminder to his deeper self. This is who I am now. He rewrote his identity, not by force, but by repetition, by assumption, and by feeling. Eventually, there was no longer a question in his mind. It felt natural to declare, I am wealthy, I am chosen, I am grateful. And so it became. He treated the act of writing as sacred. He didn't rush. He didn't worry if it was working. He knew that each word was planting a seed in consciousness, and as surely as a planted seed sprouts, the reality he wrote about had to come forth. Not because he begged, not because he asked nicely, but because he spoke it into existence. Reality takes shape through conviction, and conviction is often expressed most powerfully in the quiet moments, when no one is watching, when nothing yet appears to have changed. But the change begins in those unseen moments. He didn't wait for evidence to believe. He believed, and then the evidence came. His words were not empty. They were aligned, saturated with meaning and echoing a truth that had already been accepted in his imagination. This is how reality is rewritten. Not with force, not with striving, but with deliberate, powerful words that come from knowing. He didn't just write to express desire. He wrote to declare identity. And when identity changes, so does the world. He didn't sit down to write as a man waiting for something to happen. He wrote as one who already knew it had. And more than the words he penned, it was the feeling behind them that moved mountains. He didn't just write, "I am the winner of the lottery," with idle hope or mental repetition. He wrote it with a heart that had already celebrated, with a spirit that had already received. That feeling, the thrill of accomplishment, the peace of security, the joy of abundance, that was the true power behind his creation. Feeling is the secret ingredient. Not action, not struggle, not even the repetition of affirmations. It is feeling that impresses upon the unseen and molds the formless into form. Words are the brushstrokes, but feeling is the color, the depth, the life. He understood that without emotion, a sentence is just ink on paper. But infused with feeling, it becomes a living force, a signal to the universe that says, "This is real for me now." When he imagined holding that winning ticket, he didn't just see numbers. He felt the weight of the paper, the rush of disbelief giving way to certainty, the gratitude washing over him like a wave. He felt the calls he would make, the relief in his chest, the tears he would wipe from his eyes. He made it real, not through effort, but through inner experience. And in doing so, he shifted his state of being. He was no longer the man hoping to win. He became the man who had already won. And the world, always a mirror, had no choice but to reflect that change. This is where many miss the mark. They repeat the words, they visualize the event, but they forget to feel. They wait for circumstances to change before giving themselves permission to feel what they desire. But this man reversed the order. He felt it first. He didn't ask life to give him something new. He gave it to himself in imagination, and life followed. It always does. Emotion is the bridge between the inner and the outer. It is the proof of belief. You cannot feel what you do not accept as possible. And once you allow yourself to feel the result as though it has already happened, you step into a new state. From that state, actions are different. Thoughts are different. Outcomes are different. He lived from the end, not in fantasy, but in faith. And that faith had a sound, a temperature, a vibration. It was felt. The feeling came before the wind. It had to. Just as a tree grows from a seed buried in the dark soil, the manifestation grew from the unseen certainty he cultivated in silence. Each day he returned to that feeling, not out of impatience, but out of joy. It became his dwelling place, his sanctuary. While others waited for proof, he became the proof. He carried the evidence within him, and eventually the world bowed to it. It wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. It was alignment. It was emotional certainty. The world cannot resist a heart that knows. And his heart knew long before the numbers ever did. There were no signs in the sky, no divine signal, no hint from the outer world to suggest he was close. No sudden luck, no dreams offering confirmation, no voice from the universe whispering, "It's coming." It was silent. Still, the world gave him nothing to lean on, and yet he persisted. He kept stepping into the scene of the fulfilled desire, not once, but every day. When others would have grown tired, when doubt would have crept in and whispered, "Why are you still doing this?" he answered with quiet certainty. He wasn't looking for signs. He was the sign. His persistence didn't come from desperation, it came from knowing. He understood a truth that few are willing to live out. What you assume as true within consistently and faithfully must reflect itself without. It is Lord. So he persisted, not to force the world, but to remain faithful to the version of himself he had already accepted. That version, the one who had already won, already received, already experienced the miracle, was more real to him than the man the mirror reflected. The outer world was simply taking time to catch up, but his inner reality was already alive. This is the quiet courage no one talks about. The strength to keep assuming in the face of nothing. No reward yet, no movement, just stillness. Most would break, most would give up and declare it's not working. But he knew better. He knew the world conforms to sustained inner conviction, not to fleeting thoughts or half-beliefs, but to unshaken assumption held firm over time. So he kept writing, not to convince the universe, but to remind himself, not to ask, but to declare. He didn't write because he doubted. He wrote because he believed. It became his daily ritual, his alignment with the unseen truth. Each word he wrote, each time he imagined, was a step deeper into the state of the wish fulfilled. And though the world remained quiet, he moved with assurance. He laughed when others worried. He gave thanks when nothing had shown up. He walked as the man who had already received it. That is the power of living in the end. You no longer seek, you express. You no longer ask, you assume. An assumption, when held daily, becomes identity. That identity draws the corresponding world to itself like a magnet. The outer must bend to the inner. There is no other way. The scene changed, not by chance, but by law. The winning numbers came, the impossible became fact. But by the time the event unfolded, he was already prepared. He had lived it 1,000 times in imagination. He had felt it, breathed it, become it. And the world simply followed the path he had carved out with his persistent assumption. You do not need evidence to persist. You only need conviction. Do not wait for signs. Be the sign. Persist beyond sight. Live from the end. Let your assumption be your truth, even when the world remains silent, and in time the silence will break. Not because you forced it, but because you faithfully lived in the reality no one else could see but you. He didn't tell the world what he was doing. He didn't post it, share it, or ask for opinions. He understood something most never grasped. The creative power is not loud, it is sacred. It is not something to display, but something to dwell in. So he kept it close. He didn't declare his desire to the world, he whispered it to himself. He wasn't seeking validation from others, he was anchoring his own belief. This was a personal conversation, a silent dialogue between his present self and the version of him that already lived the fulfilled desire. When he wrote, he wasn't scripting a message to convince the universe. He was aligning his thoughts with a deeper truth. He wasn't pleading, he was confirming. He was not trying to make something happen. He was remembering what was already done in the unseen. He knew that speaking too soon or too widely often waters down the power. That desire, once exposed to doubt, begins to wither. Others project their fears, their logic, their disbelief, and that pollution can infect your own vision if you're not rooted. So he protected it. He didn't explain himself. He didn't try to convert anyone to his way of thinking. He honored the process in silence. He knew this power doesn't require noise. It requires intimacy. He treated his imagination like sacred ground. Each time he wrote, he tuned in, not to the world, but to the voice within, that inner voice, the one that says, "It is done." was the only one he needed to hear. And so he wrote not for show, but for self. He was not asking life to give him something new. He was reminding himself that it was already his. And that reminder, repeated in stillness, was enough. In this sacred space, where no one else was watching, he became someone new. He dropped the version of himself that was waiting and stepped into the one who already had. In that private exchange, pen to paper, thought to word, mind to spirit, he wove a new identity. And this identity didn't need confirmation from the outer world. It was secure, sustained, and sufficient on its own. He didn't need to be told it was working, he felt it. That feeling became his proof. He wasn't interested in announcing the process, he was living the result. His life became the announcement. Not because he declared it, but because he became it. And when the evidence arrived, it was simply the world catching up to what he had long known in secret. This is the way of true creation. Not performance, but communion. Not spectacle, but stillness. It is not in shouting what you want, but in embodying what you have already received. He honored that, and it made all the difference. His success wasn't born out of noise, but from quiet conviction. While others waited for external permission to believe, he gave it to himself. He spoke to himself, and in doing so, he tuned the world to his frequency. The future didn't come because he begged for it. It came because he agreed with it in the silence of his own soul. When he sat down to write, he wasn't just scribbling desires on paper. He wasn't hoping, he wasn't asking, he was remembering. Remembering who he truly was. In that quiet moment, pen in hand, he wasn't a man trying to win the lottery. He was something far more powerful. A creator calling forth an experience from the invisible realm into the visible world. He had awakened to a truth that changes everything. The words I am are not to be spoken lightly. They are not a wish. They are not a request. They are a decree. And what follows I am must come to pass because it is a statement of being. He was not trying to become a winner. He assumed that identity right then and there. I am the winner of the lottery. Not one day, not maybe, but now, that sentence, spoken in the silence of his own heart, was not fiction. It was creation. And so, when he wrote, it was not a man writing to get something, it was a being remembering what was already his. He had moved beyond begging and beyond striving. There was no more trying. There was only knowing. Knowing that consciousness is the only reality. Knowing that what you accept as true of yourself becomes your world. He did not need to see the wind to believe it. He believed it, and therefore he would see it. Every time he wrote, it wasn't to convince the universe. It was to align his mind with the truth of his being. He was not an observer of reality. He was its architect. He was not under the control of fate or chance. He was the very source from which circumstances flowed. And he knew that the outer world would conform, not because of effort or force, but because of assumption held with unwavering confidence. He called upon this truth not just with words, but with feeling. He felt the power of I am. He breathed it. He lived it. When he walked through the world, he didn't carry the energy of someone hoping to win. He moved with the calm certainty of one who already had. The inner shift had occurred, and so the outer shift was inevitable. This was no longer a game of luck. It was a fulfillment of law. The law that states whatever you feel yourself to be, you will experience. And so he kept returning to that truth. Again and again he affirmed not just the outcome, but the identity behind it. He wasn't becoming someone else. He was uncovering who he had always been, the one with the power to declare, I am. and know it would become flesh. He did not ask, will it work? He knew that question only arises when you forget who you are. And he refused to forget. He remembered. And in remembering, he won. Not just the lottery, but the mastery of himself. The outer win was merely a reflection of the inner command. When the numbers finally appeared, when the world finally caught up, there was no shock, only gratitude. He had already lived it, already claimed it, already become it, because he remembered who he truly was, and that memory shaped the world around him. So you see, he did not win by chance. He won because he remembered the truth, that the imagination is the womb of reality, the world is the seed, and feeling is the life that brings it forth. He did not ask the world to give, he assumed it was already his. He didn't beg, he declared. He didn't seek signs, he became the sign. While others waited for proof, he lived as proof. Day after day, in silence, in certainty, he wrote not to wish, but to affirm. And in doing so, the invisible became visible. The unseen became seen. This is the path for all who dare to believe. You do not hope for what you want, you become it. You do not look to the world for evidence, you create the evidence by embodying the end. That is the power within you. Use it. Trust it. Live it. Saying thank you. Thank you for listening. May you walk forward now with quiet confidence, knowing that your inner world holds the key to all you seek. And may you write, not to beg, but to command. Because your words, your feelings, and your assumptions are the tools of creation. Use them well, and the world will reflect what you already know to be true.